Hello, and welcome to Tuesday Talks with Mom. I'm Tera Myers, and I am so glad you're here. As part of Moms on a Mission, we're empowering moms across the country to stand up and advocate for their children's educational freedom. As a mom of an adult son with Down syndrome, I've walked this road, navigating the school system and fighting for the right to choose the best education for my child. And now I'm here to share that journey with you. Every 2 weeks, we'll sit down with different moms from around the country and provide thoughtful advice and share our experiences. Together, we're building a community of moms who are finding their voices, taking action, and making a difference. Welcome to Tuesday Talks with Mom. Well, good evening, everyone, and thanks, moms, for joining tonight. I am excited to talk. The last couple of weeks, we have been discussing all things Texas, how parents are finding their way in all of the different states and all the happenings that's going on. And today, we're going to answer questions that have been coming up as we've been talking to moms. Specifically, how do I overcome the mom guilt as it relates to my child's education? So thank you, Becki, for joining me, and Clarice. It's so good to be back together as an all moms group. And let's just get to business. Anybody
Yes.
want to open up? Hey.
Absolutely. I'm just here like we are moms on a mission. And I know that all the moms that are going to be listening to this are going to be able to relate with the fact that even though we are perceived to be, we've arrived, we all experience mom guilt.
That's right. Whether you have experienced a situation where your child isn't quite thriving the way that you hope that they would, or
Mm-hmm.
you're in a situation where, life just sometimes doesn't turn out the way you hoped that it would, and you're always questioning. We're here as moms to share some topics with you and some hopefully solutions to help you
Yeah,
find your way and know that you are part of a team of other moms across the nation.
Yes.
absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
do any of you want to share any particular stories that you've come across yourself that you've experienced before we get to any of our questions that we have tonight?
So with you talking about mom guilt, it's easy for me to have mom guilt with my daughter who has disabilities. Like I can always think of stories of feeling like I should have done more or I should have been more aware. But I also have mom guilt with my son who is older. He's 5 years older than Izzy. He's a typical student. I actually had him in my class for eighth grade Spanish, and that was not the best year of my life, let me tell you. Um, but there are certain expectations, and I think birth order has something to do with it. He's
Mm.
our first, and I had high expectations. And I want to say he is a very good kid, and he is a very good citizen in the community. But man, those junior high and high school years were rough, and we had to adjust our expectations, and we had to figure out like what's going to be in his best interest and kind of balance. We don't want him hating us, but we also want to provide a good, solid structure for him. And so I look back, and sometimes I do wonder, and I'm just going to be completely honest, I do wonder if I should have done more to um, pull him to a different school and take him out of public and put him into a different educational environment. And I know hindsight's 2020. Um, it is what it is, but I have experienced mom guilt with both children.
Well, that's a
Yeah.
very interesting take, Becki, because I too was in that same situation. I had two girls that came after Samuel, typical learners, and each of them learned differently, and they each needed different things. And sometimes, a lot of the times, because of Samuel's needs, they were put into situations like, for example, my youngest daughter would have done best if she would have been homeschooled all the way through. It was just
Mm.
better suited for her. But because I was running the program at the school where Samuel ended up going and she was already attending. And when I realized, one of the requirements was that if you teach there, your students have to go there. And
Oh,
so she was not able to make a switch after the fact. And, I had a lot of mom guilt about that. She, though, found ways around that. She said, well, I'll take mostly college courses. And that was a form of choice
yeah.
and offered her the opportunity to leave campus. She said, I'm just not interested in the day to day school, culture. I want to learn and get on about doing my business.
Hmm.
And then I had mom guilt over my second daughter because she was second in line and she was always standing in line behind Samuel. Um, try as I could, she was thrust into that first child role because by the time she was 8 months old, she became the older child. And she oftentimes teases us, oh, I was the guinea pig. And I said, I'm really sorry that God saw fit to make you come so quickly after Sam. Yep, you were the guinea pig. But it's made you a stronger, more tenacious individual as well as a fabulous mother. So, but I carried a lot of mom guilt with me, wondering if I was doing enough, if I was being at enough swim meets and being at enough track meets, and did I help them as much as I could have? And, moms, we try to do everything for every child. And sometimes I remember Clarice, you saying it once, sometimes we fall short and we have to say, I'm sorry, I didn't get it right. And it's okay. And I always tease, and I know I've said it before. Well, I gave it my best shot, but maybe you have something to talk to your therapist about now as a result of my mistakes. So, moms
I
out there,
cannot. I
I,
cannot.
I, I tell people all the time, I'm like, you have to infuse humor into your parenting because if you don't, you're going to cry. And we don't get it all right all the time, but we sure give it a valiant effort. So
Yes, we do.
that's kind of where
I
I'm at.
agree. I agree. I was just sitting here listening to both of you, and I'm like, I have had a lot of mom guilt because I felt like I put a lot into my daughter because her needs were so much greater. My son, he was the typical learner. He was easygoing, laid back. He had a little, here or there in school. I had to talk to a couple of teachers about a few things, but nothing major. But my daughter, I had to go to IEP meetings practically every week for a while there. I was getting phone calls from school every day because as her needs were continuing to be unmet, which her needs were, she couldn't read. She had dyslexia, and the older she got, the worse her avoidance behaviors became. And so the focus then shifted from who her inability to read to she's a behavior problem. And the behavior problem, as we know, is because she could not read. So
Read.
every day I was getting phone calls from work and having to leave and go to meetings, or they're trying to put her out of school, or and so I was so focused on her and so dedicated to advocating, to trying to figure out if it's dyslexia. Once I found out what it was, then getting her into a private school and all of the things. And my son didn't need any of that. And so when he was in school and I didn't get the phone calls and I didn't have to go to an IEP meeting and
Right.
I didn't have to send emails and all of that, I just was one day I remember when he was growing up, I was like, I don't pay enough attention to him because I gave her all this. I had the mom guilt. Like, I don't want him to have a problem, but I need to do something extra to compensate for all I've given to my
Right.
daughter. And
Right.
so I really felt like I needed to be really conscientious about, okay, you don't have the exact learner needs that she has, but let me try to offset that with the things that you're good at, and that, like football and basketball and those things, trying to compensate for that. And I will tell you the ultimate mom guilt that I have ever experienced in my life, and I will wish it on no one, is the day that my daughter was killed. And she was 24, and she was grown, and I had really went full into developing my tutoring center, voice advocacy center, in honor, in memoriam to what we went through, and to try to help other people with dyslexia. And so I was putting in long hours, 11 to 8, and it's a grassroots, growing it from the top. And I I felt like I wasn't giving my son enough time, and I felt like I should have been more attentive to my daughter. I should have been more on what her surroundings, what she was doing, even though she was 24. And that was the ultimate mom guilt. And I know that it's nothing I could have done outside of what I had already done. But as a mom, when something happens to your children,
Yep.
you feel like you're the mama bear. You're supposed to take care of them. And so when you can't, and when something that life altering hits you, it is
Yes.
so devastating to the mind. And that mom guilt tried to take me out of this world. But I just thank God for God's grace, and the ability to therapy wise move past that guilt.
I'm so thankful, Clarice, and I'm
Yes.
so sorry for your loss. It never lessens or goes away.
No.
So yeah, I think about you often, and what that might be like. So I'm sorry.
Thank you guys. I appreciate you guys. You guys have helped me. Moms
Wow.
on a Mission has
We're
helped
all
me.
on a mission. We're all here together.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
do we have any questions that have come up that we want to maybe tackle tonight? Paul, were you able to see any of those? If not, I've got some here that I've got in front of me. Um, how do I handle an IEP meeting, and how do I request testing? Does anybody want to tackle that one?
I just want to preface, well, however this discussion goes, um, document everything.
Yes.
If it is not written or typed, it does not exist. You can write down phone calls and times and dates and what you heard, but I can say as a teacher, I can say as a parent, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. So request things in writing, request answers in writing, so
Mhm.
that you can keep track of that documentation.
I would agree.
Excellent.
Tara, do you want to go, or I can go,
Yeah,
whichever?
go ahead, Clarice. Go ahead.
What I would say to that is, depending upon the state, and with the federal IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, that law gets derived down to the state, and the state creates their interpretation of that law and how they administer it. And so, in the state of Nebraska, our state example of the IDEA is Rule 51. And according to that, and every state has a different way of doing it, but it all has the same regulations. So first and foremost, you're gonna get parental rights and safeguards if your child is placed into special education. But here in Nebraska, from the time that you request, and it's called child find. And what
Yes.
that means is, a lot of times people will tell you, you have to wait for MD, uh, them to refer you to get tested, and you've got to wait till you go through 3 or 4 or 5, 6 different steps, and the what's the MTSS, the multidisciplinary, all of those things. You don't have to do that. If you, as a parent, or anyone who sees that your child, or determines that your child may have a disability where they need help, they can report or contact the school system and suggest. Of course, they'll contact the parent if it's not you. But as a parent, if that's what you choose and you feel like your child needs to be tested, then you request in writing to have your child tested because you suspect either a learning, emotional, physical, or mental disability. And of the 13 disability categories under special education, those includes autism, specific learning disability, other health impaired, all of the things, multiple disabilities. You can ask for that. As Becki said, put it in writing. And then
Yes.
from the date that you put that in writing,
Right.
and I would say, even if you drop the letter off at the school, I would still advise you to do it by email, so you have a running track record of the date and the time that you sent that in.
Mhm.
And then
Yes.
from that date, they have up to 45 days to get the testing done for your child. Now,
Yeah.
some might come back and say, and they've tried it because I'm a special education advocate, they have tried to say to parents who have requested it, well, there's steps that you have to go through, and sometimes you have to recite for them the law. The law doesn't say I got to go through 15 million steps. It says if I suspect or anybody else suspects that my child has a disability, I have a right to request that they be tested. So that's what you have to then refer back to them. And once that happens, they're tested, and then if you find out that they have a disability, there's other steps that you follow. But before I go there, I'll see if Tara has anything to add to that. I don't want
Yeah.
to keep going. I could keep going.
Oh yeah. Well, I will reiterate, not only not to be redundant, but to remind you, because I've had so many parents just in the last week contact me. I'm like, did you put it in writing? No, I didn't. Okay, well, it didn't happen. Well, yes, we had this phone conversation. I said, doesn't matter. It didn't happen. And I said, you're not allowed to record anything without letting the other person know that you're recording. So it's just best to put it in writing, and then everybody can refer back to it. There's no discrepancy. So just make sure everything, your request, your response to request, everything is in writing. And definitely check with your state, because the State Department of Education loves to throw in their own particular rules and laws in there as well. Check and see their time periods, the district, but like Clarice said, always refer back to the law, because the law supersedes their own personal little rules. They'll try to tell you that it doesn't. And I would encourage parents, when I was directing the program, I encouraged them, well, let's follow the steps. But first and foremost, you get that letter of request for testing immediately before you do anything else. And in the same time, simultaneously, you go ahead and start gathering data and information, because your request has to be based on something. You can't just say, well, I suspect. Well, what causes you to suspect? Gather
Right.
some portfolio of information that causes the suspect, and they may come back, which Clarice and Becki, I'm sure you guys would attest. They're going to come back and say, well, you don't have enough testing. Okay, well, that's when you start gathering up your friends and foes, and you get that list as enormous as you possibly can. It's not an us against them situation. It is us advocating for our children. And anybody,
Mhm.
you don't need a title behind your name. You don't need a bunch of letters or anything. Um, you just simply need to get that all taken care of. So let me ask another question. What happens when you get your diagnosis? We just kind of brushed on that a little bit, and what happens if I feel like it's my fault? What do I
Mm.
do? How do I overcome this? We've all experienced this. Every one of us have a child with some form of diagnosis, and you don't necessarily have to have a child with a formal diagnosis of a specific disability. It could just be that your child is having a hard time with note taking. Your
Mhm.
child is having a hard time with attention. There's all kinds of reasons why you could be feeling this way, or your child. My typical child. I had a teacher come to me and said, she always gets the right answer, but she gets it the wrong way. I said, well, let's talk about that for a second. And they said, well, it's like she uses the back door to get the answer. And I said, well, so it's not the way you taught it. That's a perfect example as to why choice
Mhm.
is so important,
Yeah.
because every child does not learn the same. So
Mhm.
Hey, but
what
she
do you
got the right answer.
she
So I
got
mean, as
the
long
right
as she gets to
answer.
the answer.
Yeah.
That's right. She figured it out. So
Yep.
I tell people, I don't know. I know each one of us are faith women, women of faith. And if you don't have a faith, I suggest, you look at some other avenues. But I resort to my faith for everything when it comes down to raising my children, being a parent, being a grandparent. It's not our fault, unless you've intentionally done something, which, most parents, that's not the case. But, um, to really resort to support systems to help you and feel it, and realizing that, what, the number one thing that you did already was to identify that there's a problem. So
Yes.
you're already advocating for your student, for your
Yep.
child. You're already there. You're in the trenches. You're noticing. What do you guys do to help moms that are kind of feeling a little guilty and feeling overwhelmed? Besides sitting with it and going, what? This is who my child is. This is what my child is dealing with. What do you guys offer?
I go through like at Voice Advocacy Center, we get calls every single day of parents who are realizing or suspecting that their child may have dyslexia. And so our tutoring center is specific to that. And so the conversation that I have and our staff has with parents who call in, is the first thing that we tell parents is you're not a bad parent, because we internalize when our kids aren't well, whether
Yep.
they're sick,
Yep.
whether it's a learning disability, whether it's a physical disability, it impacts us all. And as moms, we're carriers, so we carry that. So when
Yes.
I have parents that call the office and moms that call the office specifically, I can feel that. I can feel them. And so the first thing that I say to them is, you are not a bad mother. It's not your responsibility to know all things that you've never encountered before.
Mhm.
And the fact that you have called this number and you are now trying to advocate for your child, is it shows how much you care and how much you love them. So first, I want us to just take a moment before we even go into all the things that may be dyslexia and what we need to do with that, and just give you a moment to take that in, to exhale that. And most times the parents are in tears, they're bawling, and they're like, thank you, you this was a godsend just to hear that. And then
Mhm.
their next thing is they can feel frustrated with school systems who continually tell them, well, we're doing the best we can for your child. Your child's going to be okay. They're just probably going to be a slow learner. This is what it is. And that they believed them for so long. That's what a lot of mom guilt that comes through Voice Advocacy Center is that they entrusted a system that
Yes.
told them
Yes.
that they were going to their child was going to outgrow it, and they listened to that. And then 2 years down the line, their child has not outgrown it, so they feel very bad about that. And my response to them is this: you trusted in a system because it is the way the world has worked up to this point. You believed in the educators that were there because they went to school, and you know that all of these people went to school, and so you trusted them as professionals, no different than you would trust the doctor. However, now that you know, and you now know, you're changing that. And that's
Right.
where educational freedom comes in. Because when one school does not work, because one size does not fit all, and when your
Exactly.
child needs a different educational option, you as a parent have a right to seek that, to have that, and to request that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What about you, Becky? Anything that you want to weigh in there on the guilt issue?
For me personally as a mom, like we knew that Izzy would have challenges in school. And so, go she started the IEP process when she was 3 because we put her in preschool at our local um, elementary school, which that was a wonderful experience, but that's a story for another day. So we didn't really have many surprises or anything. I feel like the mom guilt kicked in when I thought when she started kindergarten, I thought, I do trust the system. I'm a public school teacher. I've been in the system. And so, of course, everything's going to go the way I think it should go. And it didn't. And I thought, oh my goodness, I've been a part of this system and I've trusted the system, and now it's not working. And
Right.
what else has blinded me in in this whole systemic institution? And it just really, I had to pause and be like, what else have I missed?
Mm.
And of course, looking back, I think of students that I had in my own class before I had children, my own
Yeah.
children, and I think, oh my gosh, I feel like I did a disservice because I didn't know any better. I thought the system was taking care of things, and the system wasn't taking care of things. But this is what I encourage moms and dads to do. Like when you know
Mhm.
better, you do better.
That's right.
So you can't, like, I personally, I allow myself a good 24 hours to sit and stew and whine and stomp my
Yep.
feet and all that. That's just what I do. And then after those 24 hours are over, I'm like, okay, we gotta move forward. We gotta have a plan. We gotta move forward. And again, when you know better, you do better. And that's what I have hung on to all these years. Like I'm doing the best I can with what I know. And
That's right.
when my knowledge is questioned or interrupted, I may have to go in a different direction, but that's okay.
Yes.
I would just say you give yourself 24 hours. I didn't did the crucifixion, the death, burial, and resurrection, the 3 days. So I give myself 3 days. You done gave yourself one. I might need to retract 2 of those days, but I
Yeah,
said,
I usually sat. I'm a Becky. I sat for about. I let the morning dawn. Uh, Psalm 143 verse 8. Let the morning bring me word of your unfailing love, for I put my trust in you. Show me the way that I should go, for up to you I lift my soul. So in the morning, I would give myself the day, and my poor family, boy, they would hear it. But that's where I seeded through all the issues. And then I would in the morning make the phone calls because I had simmered down a little bit.
Yes.
But if I waited too long, then I lost my traction.
Yeah.
So, maybe I needed to be somewhere in between there. But boy, I'll tell you what, the morning, the morning usually came. So, well, we've only got a few minutes left. I want to just cover briefly, ladies, if we can, one more thing. How do I know I've already dealt with the guilt? I know there's a problem. This isn't working. How do I know when it's time to change schools? You know, when is it okay to just pull the cord? Does anybody want to quickly answer that? That was the last question that we had, is like, I just feel like such, like, I think this question comes from this place. We are trained in America that your entire community's success hinges on your public school, and not just your community, but your Friday night lights and your teachers and all the folks and everything. And that may have been true once upon a time. And I personally am a product of this circumstance. It took me 3 years to finally pull the cord, and then that caused more guilt. So I think this question comes from, you know, it's okay. Like, they're going to survive. Anybody want to add some impact on that? Of when do you know
I
when
I
think
when
a parent. Oh, I think a parent knows, and I'll keep it brief, Becky, so you can add on.
hmm,
I think a parent knows because a parent is their child's best advocate. I don't care what degree anybody has, I don't care what their professional title is in the school system, from superintendent on down. Nobody knows your child better than you. And you
right,
are the one that is seeing the impact to them. And when you see that school, whether it's emotional, mental, or just just in their being, in their self-worth, that it's not working, then that's when it's time to change and do something different, because
yes,
you're your child's best advocate, and trust
absolutely.
yourself.
Yes, trust your gut. Yeah, I
trust
know
your
for us with Izzy, um, we've been asked by many people, why didn't you just stay and fight and make it easier for other students down the road, blah blah blah. And I get that. And to the parents that fight, if that's what you feel like you need to do, then fight the system. I felt as a teacher, we weren't we weren't making any headway.
right.
And if I, as a teacher, couldn't make headway, then I felt like we didn't have any other options. The other thing is, and I don't share this very often because it 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 affects my heart. One of Izzy's specialists shared with us several years ago a list of chronic conditions or birth defects or birth injuries. A whole list. Like, these are the kids that have the most trouble with mental health issues, or they are the most likely to do something dramatic to take their own lives. And Izzy's condition was at the top of the list. And I I just froze because I thought, I never want, with all the other physical challenges that she has, I never want a mental health challenge to be that significant for her. And so when I saw that she wasn't included in the playground, and she wasn't included at lunch, and she wasn't included in PE, and the list goes on of where she wasn't included in kindergarten, in the basic classroom of like how you stand in line for the water fountain and how you say please and thank you and sharpening your pencil and all that. she wasn't included. And I thought, I'm not going to wait around. I'm not going to wait around and cross my fingers and hope that at some point they'll be more inclusive. Because if they're not going to be inclusive in kindergarten, they're not going to be inclusive in first grade or second grade. She was left out of field trips because she uses a wheelchair. And so, all that being said, we knew as parents it was important to get her out of that environment and put her in an environment where she was included and she knew she belonged. And she stayed in that school for 9 years. And I knew that was the right answer. But again, back to what you two ladies have already said, like parents know in their guts whether it's worth it to stick it out or if it's like, like what we did was like, boom, we're done. We've given it a chance. My child's mental health is much more important than that systemic institution down the road.
So, parents, I hope you were able to glean some information and realize at the end of the day that you are best suited to make decisions for your children. Don't let the guilt overtake you. Follow your gut, like Becki and Clarice said. Make decisions that are best for your children. And we look forward to answering your questions next time at Moms on a Mission Tuesday Talks with Moms.